Stay with this. Simon Adams is the Executive Director of the Global Centre for the Responsibility to Protect. He joins us now live from New York. Thank you very much for your time. We have been hearing throughout the day of the impact this genocide has had on Rwanda and the Rwandans themselves. But what impact would you say it has had on the wider region or the wider world?
Sure, and thank you for having me on. So look, I think Rwanda had a huge impact on the UN, and I think it obviously covered the UN in shame. I think there's no event probably in the UN's history, with the possible addition of the genocide at Srebrenica the following year, that clouded the UN in more shame than what happened in Rwanda in 1994, when the UN Security Council was essentially silent and compliant, and the international community chose inaction and indifference rather than responding in a comprehensive way to what was going on. So I think in the aftermath of that, led mainly by Kofi Annan, I think there was a rethinking of what it means to have a United Nations, what it means to have an international community when it comes to these most conscience-shocking crimes. So I think that we've still got a long way to go, but I think things have hopefully improved somewhat since 1994.
Well, you said improved somewhat, but we are 25 years on, and given some of the events that we're still seeing to this day in many parts of the world, do you think these lessons have been learned? Do you think the world has learned to intervene when it needs to?
I think they've been partly learned. I think the general policy before, when faced with genocide anywhere in the world, was one, as I said, of indifference and of inaction. So in a sense, inconsistency is a form of progress. So when we look at how the international community has responded to somewhere like the Central African Republic or South Sudan or the Congo, not genocidal situations, but situations where mass atrocities are happening, I think that's a positive thing. But of course, look at the world in which we live. Look at Syria. Look at what happened to the Rohingya minority in Myanmar, where a genocide was perpetrated in late 2017. Look at the situation in Cameroon at the moment, where the country is on fire and we can't even get it on the agenda of the UN Security Council. So I still think there is a glaring gap between pretty words and consistent action. And obviously, I think we need to close that gap and consistently uphold our responsibility to protect people around the world when they're faced by these most conscience-shocking crimes.
And how do we close that gap? What is it that needs to be done? Do you feel in some way that this is a responsibility of world leaders, or do you think perhaps that, given the violence that we see on a daily basis, perhaps people have become desensitized to this? How do we close that gap?
Well, I think there is a sense of kind of I don't know quite what to call it, but a kind of atrocity attention deficit disorder. I think the world seems chaotic to people. It can be very depressing and demoralizing for people, and so the tendency is to want to look away. But I think there is something, it's incumbent upon our leaders, it's incumbent upon the UN United Nations to not look away and to be involved. And I think if you look at the situation like that in Cameroon at the moment, or of what happened in Myanmar in 2017, and Myanmar's a very good case. There was a genocide there. We had years of early warning. We had years of reports by human rights organizations like my own talking about the persecution of the Rohingya, talking about what was happening. And then, of course, the trigger came, the genocide happened, and there was no action. And that was partly because of, the veto on the UN Security Council, which has become an impediment to acting in many of these cases. But I think, I feel sometimes that the international community is still more content to mourn afterwards and to attend a commemoration service than it is to actually act in a timely and decisive way when people are facing the threat of the machete or the death squad or of the mass grave.
Okay, a sobering analysis there from Simon Adams, Director of the Global Centre for the Responsibility to Protect. Thank you very much for speaking with us on Al Jazeera.